Hello and welcome to this tutorial on reading in data from a file format and then exporting it back to either the same format or other different formats. Now, first we will import the necessary libraries. The first one that we will import is Pandas and we will import it as PD. Once that is done, we will first move on to CSV. Now, a CSV file is basically a comma separated file. For example, as you can see here, all the records here are separated by a comma. So this is how Pandas recognizes that each value after a comma and before another comma is a different field. Right? Okay. So now we will first import a CSV. First we will first import a data frame into from a CSV file. To do that, we will write pd.read underscore CSV and then we'll give the name of the file. Now, since this file is now currently I'm in this working directory, and now to get the file I will have to go to first data and then I will use this CSV file. So what I'll type here is data slash cov and then I'll press tab to autocomplete and it will tell me all the available files in that directory. So I'll choose this OG, which stands for original, and I'll assign it to a variable called COVID, or rather I would call it a df because that is more general. So yeah, now I'll show what the data frame looks like. So this is the data frame. It contains various columns, around 10 columns, and if we scroll down it will tell us it contains 10,742 rows also. So this is the data frame that contains a list of all the coronavirus COVID-19 cases around the world on each day. For example, currently it is showing me for Afghanistan for all the dates as and when they were recorded. Similarly it contains for each and every other country. Now, first we will look at the header. Now, this is pd.read underscore CSV contains quite a few parameters. So, yeah. So when I press shift and tab here and tab again, it will show me the list of all the parameters that this read CSV accepts. There are around 49 such parameters, but we will go over some of the most important ones in this lecture. The first one is the file path or buffer. It is basically the name of the file where the file is located. The separator is comma, we know that it is comma. The delimiter is an alias for separator, it is the same thing. Now we will first see header. Now header is infer, which means that Pandas, when it reads the CSV file, it will assume that this first row of the file is the column row, right? So that is why when we ran this code here, it showed the first as in the columns, okay, and the row started from after that, from the second row onwards. So if we explicitly pass header is equal to none, then what will happen is this date, rep, day, month, this columns, they will be uh, assumed to be rows and along with all the other date columns, but that is not what we want. Hence we will keep header is equal to 0. Now this 0 is an integer index. We can pass in any integer, like for example we know that the columns are in the first row, so first row we can tell Pandas that header is in the 0th row. So that is because indexing in Python starts at 0. Hence when we pass header is equal to 0, it will take into consideration our request and keep the 0th row as the columns. Okay, so this is how header works. Now, even if you don't pass this argument, Pandas has a built-in capability which will assume that the 0th row is the column. Hence, if you do not pass anything, it will still show the 0th row as the columns. Right. So header is equal to 0, so this was the number 1. Now the second is names. Now sometimes in a data set we will not have the column names. Like in the same data set I have removed the column header. Like in this one we have the column, I have removed this and made a different file. So if we load in this data set, let us see what happens. I'll type pd.read underscore csv data slash cov no calls, right? This is the data set. Now what will happen is the first row, the 14th of April, which was here the first row of the data set, it now pandas is assuming that it is the column, because pandas always assumes that the first row, if not explicitly told so, pandas will assume that the first row is the column row. Hence this first row now becomes the column. So now here we know that this is not correct, hence we'll pass here header is equal to none. Now what will happen is pandas will tell us, will say, okay, you do not want that to be the header row, hence it will push it downwards into the data field row, and now it will automatically assume automatically assign the integer numbers as the columns. Now what we can do here is that instead of passing header is equal to none, we can say names is equal to, and then pass in a list of the column names that we want to assign. For example, we know that the first one is the date, second one is the day, then next is the month, then next is the year, then next is the cases, then the next is the deaths, then the next is the country, the next is the code, then next is again code, so we'll name it code 2 because the columns cannot have the same name, otherwise they will just be overwritten and one of the columns will lose one of the columns, hence we have to give different column names. And the last one is the population, right? So when we run this code now, what happens is our custom given names have become the column names. So this names keyword, what it does is it will assign all the column names as we have told it to do, right? So this is the thing about names keyword. Now the next parameter is index underscore col. Now since we have not told pandas what should be the index, it has automatically assumed, it has also automatically assigned 0 1 2 3 4 until 10,741 to be the index, right? But if we, for example, sometimes we might want that the index to be the date column, so we can very easily do this by, now this is the third one, so I will do it for, okay, now what we can do is we can say pd.read underscore csv data slash, now we will load in the original data set, right? And we can say that index underscore column is equal to, now we can either pass the integer location of the column which we want as the index, or we can directly give the name of the column if we know it beforehand. So I can very easily say this is equal to date rep, and what will happen is this date rep now becomes the index column, right? Otherwise we could have just said index col underscore 0, and pandas would have assumed, would have checked which is the 0th column, and the 0th column is basically the first column and the date column, and hence this date rep now becomes the index. Next, so next one is use calls. Now sometimes what happens is you do not want to read in all the columns. Now you know beforehand after reading this data set that you might want only date rep, cases, deaths and countries. So what we will do is we'll say pd.read csv, we'll read in the data slash original, okay? And now what we'll do is we'll say, we'll ask pandas to use calls is equal to, and we'll pass in a list. Now either we can say whether we can explicitly tell that use this date trap column and cases column and the countries. For example, we want only these three columns to be in the data frame. We do not want all the other columns, so we can say use these three and it will give us only these three columns and in a data frame. Now if this sounds like very a tedious task to type all the names, what we can do is pass the integer location of the columns. For example, the date rep is the 0th column, the date rep is the 0th column, 1 2 3 4, the cases is column number 4 and country is column number 6. So we will type use calls 0, 4, 6 and we will get the same answer. We will get date rep, cases and countries and territories. So you can use either the integer indexing or you can explicitly pass the labels of the columns to Pandas and tell it to give you only those columns. Next one is n rows. Yes, so now n rows is like we saw here, we have over 10,700 rows here. Now what if we just want to do an initial data exploration and so we do not want to load in all the rows, because these has only 10,000 rows, but sometimes you might have millions of rows and it might be a computationally very expensive task to load in all the rows at once. Hence what we can do here is say pd.read csv /, okay, and we'll tell it only load the first, suppose 15 rows. Okay, so what it will do is it will only load the first 15 rows. So this is very fast as well, because it does not have to load the entire data set. It will load all the columns, but it will not load all the rows. It will only load the first 15 rows as we have specified. So 0 to 14, that is 15 rows. Okay, so this speeds up the task for a basic data exploration. Now skip rows. Now skip rows is important because sometimes what happens is in our data set, the data that we want to extract does not start from the first row. Sometimes the first row might contain the name of the data set, that is COVID-19 data set, and the second and third row might contain some garbage values. It might be anything, you know. So we cannot, the Pandas will need to be told explicitly that you do not need to consider these columns and directly start your work from column number 6, from row number 6, my bad, sorry. So what we can do here is we can say pd.read csv data / will load in the skip rows data frame, skip rows csv file. Okay, now we know that the first, second, third, fourth and fifth, these 5 lines are wasted, so we need to start from the 6th line altogether. So we'll say skip rows is equal to 5. We need to skip 5 rows. So it was as simple as that. So Pandas has automatically skipped all those 5 rows. Now if you do not pass this column, this parameter, it will throw up an error because it has encountered a certain garbage values at the beginning and it does not know what to do with them. Hence we need to explicitly pass in skip rows is equal to 5, so that from the 6th row it will assume that the first row is the column, and from the very next row it will start the data. Now next is pass dates. Now pass dates is also pretty important because in this data set we have a time, this is a time series data set, because it contains data with respect to time, because as in this is the this row contains data about this date, this contains about 13th April, this is 12th April. So in most cases it is very, very important that this currently, now when we see okay, so this data set which we have loaded here, df, we'll see what the information is about this, right? So we'll say df.info. This info is a method that we can use of this data frame. So now this will tell us that it has 10,742 entries. This date rep, these are the column here, these are the column names here, and these are how many values it has. So date rep has 10,742, and some of them have less than 10,742. That is, some of them have nan values, that is there are missing values there, and we will see how to impute and how to check for those missing values in a later lecture. Now, what we can see here is that this date rep column is an object. It is not a time. It is not a time. It is not a time series object basically, because this day object is an integer, month is an integer, countries and territories it is an object because it is a string, hence it is taken as an object here. Now we want this date rep to be a time series object. So what we'll do here is pd.read csv data slash now, and now we will say here pass dates is equal to, and we will explicitly tell this which column do we want to pass as the date column. Now we can see here that this is the 0th column, this date rep, that is, it is the first column, and hence we will say pass dates is equal to 0. Now if we only say pass dates is equal to true, then what will happen is this pass dates looks for the index column and it assigns the time series object to this index. Now we know that index is simple integer indexing, so it will not have any effect on that. Hence we need to first say index underscore col is equal to 0. So now this will mean that this date rep is now the index. Now we'll go step by step. Okay, index call is equal to 0. Now we can see that this date rep is now the index, and now we can say pass dates is equal to true. So now what will happen is, now this looks the same, okay, but when we look at the information of this data frame, we can see that this the date rep has been removed from the columns because it is now an index. It is a date time index. Now if you do not want to pass it index column is equal to 0 initially, we can say simply pass dates is equal to and pass the integer location of the date rep column, which is 0th column. Okay, pass dates is equal to 0. Now when we run this, it will give us this so now it will give us the same answer, but since it is not an index, we haven't yet made this date rep the index, hence it is still a column, but it is now a date time object, right? Okay, right. So that is those were some of the most important CSV parameters. Now reading Excel files is very similar to reading CSV files, because it is basically the same thing except for a few parameters. We'll look at one of those parameters. Now when we see in an Excel file, we have many sheets. We can have many sheets. Now how can Excel know which sheet do we want to pass in as a data frame? For that, what we'll do is pd.read Excel, and then we'll pass data slash COVID, now COVID-19.excelSX. Now you can see that this has an extension of XLSX, so we are using this class of pd.read Excel. Now here we need to, there's also a parameter. When we press shift tab, we will see this IO, this stands for the location of the Excel file. Now we need to give it a sheet name, right? So by default the sheet name is 0. I'll tell you what that means, but if you want to explicitly tell the sheet name, we can say sheet name is equal to, and then we can pass in this sheet name. So I'll just copy this sheet name. Okay, so this is the sheet name. Now I'm telling Pandas that go to this Excel file and read in the sheet which has this name. So when I run this, it gives me the same data frame, but this was an Excel file, and before here it was a CSV file. So from Excel file we need to give it a sheet name, that which sheet do we want to grab, right? So now maybe I do not want to grab this sheet, but I want to grab this GRE sheet. Okay, so what I'll do is, the name of the sheet is GRE. So what I'll do is, I'll simply say sheet name is equal to GRE. So now this will grab the second sheet, which has Jack, Anna, Mike and Jasmine and their GRE scores. So this is a small fictitious data set I made up, right? Okay, so we can explicitly pass the name of the sheet if we want only one sheet from many multiple sheets in a single Excel file. Now instead of passing this GRE, what we can do is we can pass the integer location of the sheet. So if I pass sheet name is equal to 0, what Pandas will do it will go to this Excel file and it will look for the 0th sheet name, 0th sheet basically. So this is the 0th sheet, this is sheet number 1, this will be sheet number 2, this will be sheet number 3 and etc. So this sheet number 0 is COVID-19, so it will automatically bring in that data frame, that Excel file as a data frame. Now if I pass in sheet name is equal to 1, what it will do is it will go to the next sheet and give me this data frame, this small data frame. So this is all. The rest all parameters are same as in read CSV, hence we will not go over them now. It was only this one small thing which you need to keep in mind, that you need to pass in the name of the sheet if there are multiple sheets and you want to grab the second sheet or the third sheet instead of the first sheet. If you do not pass in anything, Pandas will assume that you want to grab the first sheet and hence it will grab the first sheet that it encounters, the sheet number 0, as it is also mentioned here that by default sheet name is equal to 0, right? Great. Now we'll go to JSON. Now JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Now JSON is basically a dictionary style of storing information, right? So it has a nested dictionary structure. So we'll see what it is. We'll first see what I made a fictitious data set of admits of students seeking admission into graduate school. Okay, so I'll show you what the data set looks like. Yeah, this admits.csv. So this is the data set. So I can see I made the first row as the columns, which has GRE, GPA, GRE, TOEFL, WorkX, research, and whether they got the admit or not. 0 stands for no admit, 1 stands for admit. Now I made 100 rows for 100 students who have different GPAs, GRE score, TOEFL, WorkX, how many research papers they have written, and whether they got the admit into their preferred college or not. So this is the data set. Now I will load this data set into now I'll what I'll do is I've also made a JSON file of the same data, right? I converted the CSV file into a JSON file, and this is how the JSON looks like, right? Okay, so now the keys must be strings, and these strings are the column names like GPA, and here we see GRE, and now here we see TOEFL, and the values, they are basically this 0, 1, 2, these are the index numbers, and these are the corresponding values of each index. Now we'll see how it is done. I'll say pd.read underscore JSON, and I will give it data slash admits.json. Now I get this data set, which looks very messy here. It has been made very streamlined by Pandas. Now as you can see here, the indexing has been off, because after 0, 1 it is showing me 10, 11, 12 until 19, then 2, then 20. What we can do here is simply say sort index method, and it will sort the index. So that is not an issue right now. Okay, now what the main thing here is that read JSON has basically 5 file orientations. Orient is equal to columns, index, values, records, table and split, basically 6 orientations. Now this orientation where we can see that the column names are the keys, right? This is called the column orientation. Okay, so it is simple as that. Now we will see how other orientations look like. I'll first say admits is equal to pd dot read underscore csv data slash admits dot csv. Okay, and then okay, now so this admits, I'm importing this CSV file first. I'll tell you why. So now this is the data set, okay, in this from the CSV file. It's the same thing as the JSON file. Now what I'll do is I'll say pd dot to underscore JSON, and I will not exactly pd, I will say admits dot to underscore JSON, and I'll tell it orient is equal to, what was the first one? The first one is the columns. When I say columns, so this is how this whole data set, this whole very much streamlined data set will be saved into a JSON format when I tell it to orient in the column manner. So this is the same thing, the GPA, and then we can see the GRE here. Okay, so this will save column by column into the keys. Now when I say orient is equal to, for example, when I say orient is equal to values. Now what values does is it will get rid of all the column names, and it will only preserve the values that each of the data fields, like for example 6.8, 326, 106. Now you can see here, now 6.8, 326, 106. So now it is only storing a list of all the values and a list of all the list values. For example, this is the 0th row, this was the first row, etc. So now if the data set looks something like this in the JSON format originally, then after we import it, we have to give column names, because Pandas will not know what column names to use, and hence for that we will need to provide column names in this case. Now I will just copy and paste. Okay, now the next one that we will look at is index. Orient is equal to index. Now when we say orient is equal to index, these index values, I'll show you which one, these index values, these integer indexes, those will become my keys, right? Like for example, in this columns, the column names were my keys and my values were the individual rows. But in orient is equal to index, these index values will be my keys, and this GPA, GRE, TOEFL, these will be saved individually. So you can see that this is one dictionary. This is for the second index, this is my dictionary. So when I load it using orient is equal to index, it will automatically understand, how to load it. Okay, so this is another way to orient. Now the next one is split. When I say split index, what it will do is, just see this carefully, it will split all the columns together. It will assign the columns key to this GPA, GRE, TOEFL, WorkX, Research, Admit. Okay, then it will assign the indexes all together, keep all the indexes together, like from example 0 until 99, as you can see here, and then it will preserve all the data in this double nested list. Okay, each and individual data. Look, I know it is difficult for a human to read this, but for a computer it is pretty easy. So don't fret over this too much, how it is saving and how can I interpret this. You just need to understand what orientation the currently it is, because if you see a data frame of if you see a JSON file with this orientation, you must know that this is a split orientation, and that will help you afterwards. Now another one is the records orientation. Now what we will do here is records. Now what records does is that it will save individual dictionary for each field, for each row basically. Like this is the first dictionary, it will store GPA, a key value pair of each of the column and values, like GPA 6.8, GR 326. Like for all these rows, it will store individual dictionaries, and it will store a list of all those things. So this is how orient is equal to records works. Now the last one which we will see is orient is equal to table. Okay, now orient is equal to table. Now when you say orient is equal to table, this is a bit messy, because it will tell you it will first for its own sake it will store the name of the columns. Like for index it is a type integer, name it will say it is a GPA, the first column it is a number, the GRE is a number, TOEFL is a string, then workx is a string, name is, and it will store like this way. Okay, so this is not super important for us, but it is important to understand what structure the JSON file is in. I will tell you why. Because for example, if we have a data frame like this, if we have a JSON file in this format, now what I'll do here is we'll save this data frame, we'll save this file into a JSON file. Like for example, split json.json, okay, data slash. Okay, so now what has happened is I have saved this admits CSV file into a JSON file and with a split orientation into this file name. Now if I retrieve, if I see here how it looks like, now it has made this file, and this is how it looks. All the column names are together, all the indexes are together, and all the values, all the data are together. If I ask Pandas to load in this this file, this split JSON file, what I'll do is I'll say pd.read JSON, and I'll tell it is in data folder and split json.json, and now if I just press enter, it will show me an error, because this read JSON assumes that the orientation is by default columns, but we know that it is in a split format. So we'll have to tell Pandas that the orientation is equal to split, split. So now it will tell okay, and now it will automatically check here which are the column names, and it will take into consideration the columns, the index, the data, and it will do the work very easy for us by making a data frame out of it. Okay, so this is why you need to know which orientation the JSON file is in, because it will assume it is in columns format by default, this read JSON class, but if it is in split format, then you need to tell it is in split format. If it is in, for suppose if it is in index format, you need to tell it is in index format, and hence it will automatically make arrangements for that and give you the data set that you need. Okay, so this was all about the JSON. Look, more often than not you will be using either CSV or Excel or maybe an HTML sometimes, but I mean maybe you might use JSON in sometimes, but more often than not you will be using either a CSV or an Excel file format. So don't fret too much about it. So now the next one is read HTML. Now this is pretty interesting. Now read HTML says that if I say pd.read HTML, and if I pass in a link here, like for example if I go to Wikipedia and say not Pokemon, if I say Twitter, okay, we'll do a Pokemon afterwards. Okay, Wikipedia, Twitter. Now what we see here is that it contains many columns, basically data, it contains many tables basically, yeah. So for example, this is a table, this is a table. Now if we want to extract this table, for example, okay, so what we will do here is very simply we'll copy this link, we will copy this link, and it will simply paste this link here, and we will tell Pandas that you need to match. Now how will Pandas know which table do we need to extract? So we need to tell it that take the take the table basically which contains the name employees. Okay, so it will look into all the tables and it will search for employees match. What we see here is not a pretty sight, so we will do htm is we will save it as in an object. Okay, yeah. Now we will first check how many tables did it select by doing length of htm. This length does it will tell me how many tables are there in this. So now if I check htm of 0, that is the first table that it selected, it will tell me this one, but this is not of importance to me. So I'll check the next table. So now this is the table that I was looking for, right? Now we saw this table here and now we have it here. Okay, so now I know that these are all the references, numbers are there, but this is a quick and dirty way to import data from an HTML file very quickly. The next one that we will look at is read clipboard. Now this is very quick and dirty way. This is I will not encourage you to use it in your practice, but it is a handful thing to know. So what we will do is, this is a very simple way, this is a very interesting thing also. Now if I want, for example, I want this data set. Okay, so instead of typing making a data frame in Pandas, what I'll do is I'll do Control C. Okay, I'll just copy this what I need and I will say here pd.read clipboard and I'll just open and close the parenthesis. Now as soon as I run this, it will give me this magically. It seems like magic, but it is pretty magical, I must say, because like for example, if I come here and if I want only the first 10 rows and only, for example, these columns, okay, I want only first 14 rows and these columns, I'll press Ctrl C. I will come here, I'll say pd.read clipboard and I'll open and close parenthesis, and now voila, I have all those 12-14 rows here. Okay, along with this. So now you can see here that Pandas automatically assigned the first row as the columns. Do not use this, because I'll tell you why do not use this in practice. For example, if we do not know this mic name, if this mic name is missing, and now if we copy and paste everything, okay, so now what will happen is pd.read clipboard. Now what will happen is, now this 300, we know that this is a GRE score, but this 300 will be shifted backwards into the name column, and this GRE now becomes a NaN, not a number. It is a missing value now, but we know this is not correct. This 300 is the GRE score, so this is a shortcoming of the read clipboard. But if you want a very quick analysis of your Excel file, of a data set that is in an Excel file, you can use this. Now after we have learnt how to read in data sets, from CSV or Excel or Clipboard or HTML or JSON, we now should know how to export the data that we have, for example the data that we have here, into a CSV file. Okay, so now what this admits data frame looks like is this way. Okay, now if I want to export this into a CSV file, what I'll do is admits.to_CSV. Now we first initially we had done read_CSV in the beginning. Here we had done pd.read CSV because we wanted to read in the file, but now we want to export it to a CSV, so we'll say admits.to_CSV. Now we will have to pass in a name, for example admits_new, and pass in the extension of the file. Okay, so as soon as I press enter, this has automatically made up a new file here. So the admits new CSV file is here, and we can see here that this is the same thing here, but we can also, what we see here is that 0 1 2 3 4 5 6, these integer indexes have also crept in, but we do not want this thing to happen. So what we will do here is that we'll pass in this index is equal to currently this index is equal to true. So what we'll do is pass in index is equal to false. So now if I check what it looks like, admits underscore new, it has gotten rid of those integer values, and now we only have the column names and the row values here. Okay, so this is how we export it to a CSV, and similarly we can export it to admits dot to underscore excel. Okay, so in this way we can export it to many other file formats. Like we can see here, all these file formats are available. Okay, so this is how we do it.